Dr. Han Sujai stared at her computer screen in the quiet laboratory of the Korean Space Research Institute. It was past midnight, but she couldn't stop looking at the data from the Mars rovers. Something was different. Something was wrong, or perhaps wonderfully right. This can't be correct, she said to herself, pushing her glasses back up her nose. The numbers on her screen showed water movement under the surface of Mars. Not ancient water paths from millions of years ago, but recent movement, within the past month. Suji picked up her phone and called Dr. Kim Dua. She knew he would still be awake. He always worked late too. "Duha, you need to see this," she said when he answered. "The rover data. It's showing active water patterns." 20 minutes later, Duha stood behind Suji's chair, his eyes wide as he looked at the readings. "Run the numbers again," he said. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking as he gripped the back of her chair. Suji typed quickly, running the calculations once more. The same results appeared. "See these patterns." She pointed to a series of lines on the screen. "The moisture sensors are picking up regular movement. It's like there's a water system still working under the surface." Duha pulled up a chair and sat next to her. "Show me the historical data," he said, "from 6 months ago." They spent the next hour comparing readings. The patterns were clear. Something had changed on Mars. The supposedly dead planet was showing signs of activity that no one had ever seen before. "We need to tell Director Park," Duha said finally. "This could change everything we know about Mars." Suji nodded, but her fingers were already typing an email to request an emergency meeting. As she wrote, more data from the rovers came in. The water movements were following specific paths, like a planned system. The next morning, they presented their findings to Director Park and the senior research team. Suji showed them map after map, explaining how the rovers had detected the water patterns. "The rovers weren't even designed to find this," she explained, pointing to a large screen showing Mars' surface. "They discovered it by accident. The moisture sensors were just doing routine ground tests when they picked up these readings." One of the senior scientists raised his hand. "Could this be equipment failure? Or maybe ice melting from normal temperature changes?" Suji shook her head. "No, sir. We checked everything 3 times. The patterns are too regular for natural ice melt, and 5 different rovers are showing the same readings in different locations. They can't all be broken in exactly the same way." Director Park stood up slowly. He was usually a man of few words, but now he spoke with clear excitement. "Dr. Han, Dr. Kim, I want you to redirect all available rovers to track these water movements. Whatever this is, we need to understand it. This could be the biggest discovery on Mars since we found the first signs of ancient water." Suji and Duha spent the rest of the day sending new instructions to the rovers. As they worked, Suji couldn't help but smile. She had always believed Mars had more secrets to share. Now finally, the red planet was beginning to reveal them. That night, as she finally prepared to go home, Suji looked at the live feed from one of the rovers. The small machine was faithfully following its new instructions, scanning the Martian surface for more signs of water movement. These rovers, humanity's robot explorers, were about to change our understanding of Mars forever. And this was just the beginning. Little did Suji know that what they had discovered was far more significant than just moving water. The rovers had stumbled upon something that would challenge everything humans thought they knew about Mars, and perhaps about humanity's place in the solar system. 2 weeks after Suji's discovery, the Korean Space Research Institute's main conference room was filled with faces on large screens. NASA, ESA, and other space agencies from around the world had gathered for this virtual meeting. Park Ji-ho stood at the front of the room, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "The water movement patterns are consistent," Park explained, showing the latest rover data. "We need to modify our existing rovers and send new ones to investigate further." His voice was steady, though his heart was racing. This was the biggest project he had ever led. A NASA director spoke up from one of the screens. We can redirect 2 of our rovers to the locations you've identified, but they'll need new software to track these water patterns properly. We've already started working on the software updates, Park replied. He nodded to the technical team in the corner of the room. Our team can have them ready in 3 days. The meeting continued for 2 hours. By the end, they had a plan. 6 rovers from different space agencies would work together to map the water movements. 2 new rovers would be fast-tracked for launch within the next month. Back in her lab, Suji worked with Duhad to prepare the new scanning patterns for the rovers. Look at this, she said, pointing to her screen. The water isn't just moving randomly. It's following old channels under the surface. Duha leaned closer to look. Like an ancient plumbing system, he said quietly. But who built it? And why is it active now? Their work was interrupted by Park, who rushed into the lab. We have a problem, he said. The Chinese Space Agency just announced they're sending their own mission to Mars. They want to be the first to understand what's happening. Sujai looked up from her computer. But we need to work together on this. One country can't do it alone. Exactly, Park agreed. That's why we need to show them what we've already learned by working together. He pulled up a chair between Suji and Dua. Show me everything you found so far. We need to prepare a presentation that will convince them to join our joint mission. Over the next few days, the team worked around the clock. They created detailed maps showing how the rovers would work together to track the water movements. Each rover had different strengths. Some were better at drilling, others at analyzing chemicals. Together, they could uncover the truth about what was happening on Mars. The Chinese scientists joined their next meeting. Suji presented their findings, showing how the water patterns suggested an organized system beneath Mars' surface. This isn't just about finding water, she explained. This could be evidence of engineering on a planetary scale. The room fell silent. Even the skeptics couldn't ignore the implications. If someone or something had built this system, it would change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Finally, the Chinese Space Agency agreed to join the international mission. Their rover would work alongside the others, sharing data and resources. Park gathered his team after the meeting. This is how humanity moves forward, he said. Not competing, but working together. Every rover we have on Mars is part of the same mission now, to understand what's happening on that planet. As they prepared for the arrival of the new rovers, Suju couldn't help but feel excited. The machines they were sending to Mars were more than just robots. They were humanity's eyes and hands on another world, working together to uncover its secrets. That night, as she watched the live feed from the rovers, she saw something new. One of the rovers had detected an unusual energy reading near a water movement site, but that would have to wait until tomorrow. For now, the mission was moving forward, and the red planet was about to be explored like never before. Li Nin-su sat in the rover control room, guiding one of the machines through a crater they hadn't explored before. The crater's walls were steep, but the rover moved carefully down the slope, sending back clear images of the rocky surface. Min-su had controlled rovers for 5 years, but today felt different. That's strange, he said, noticing the rover's instruments were showing unusual readings. The electromagnetic sensors were detecting something, but the pattern didn't match anything they had seen before. He picked up his phone and called Dr. Han Suji. Dr. Han, you need to see this, Min-su said when she answered. Remember the water movements you found? Well, I think we just found something else. Suji arrived at the control room 10 minutes later, slightly out of breath from running. She looked at Min-su's screens, her eyes widening. The energy readings, they're pulsing, she said, like a heartbeat. They watched as the rover continued its descent into the crater. The energy signals grew stronger as it moved deeper. Min-su carefully steered the machine toward the source of the readings. Look at the pattern, Suju said, pointing to one of the screens. It's too regular to be natural. Something is generating this energy, but what? Dr. Kim Do had joined them soon after, bringing data from other rovers in different locations. We're seeing similar signals from 3 other sites, he said, spreading the papers on a desk, all near the water movement areas we found earlier. Min-Soo moved the rover closer to the energy source. Suddenly, all the rover's instruments showed massive spikes in their readings. The camera feed began to show strange lights dancing across the Martian surface. It's responding to the rover's presence, Suji whispered. She turned to Min-Soo. Can you run a full scan of the area? Min-Soo nodded and started the scanning sequence. As the rover worked, they saw something extraordinary. Hidden beneath the surface of the crater was a network of structures, all pulsing with the same energy. This isn't just random energy, Duha said, studying the scan results. These structures, they're connected to each other. And look, they line up perfectly with the water movement patterns. The rover's camera suddenly caught something reflecting light. Min-Soo zoomed in on it. Half buried in the red soil was something smooth and metallic, clearly not natural. We need to tell Director Park right away, Suji said. But before she could reach for her phone, the rover's instruments detected something new. The energy patterns were changing, becoming more active. The signals, Min-Soo said, checking his readings again. They're getting stronger. And look at this, they're starting to match the rover's own energy signature. They watched in amazement as the lights around the rover grew brighter. The machine's sensors were recording data faster than they could process it. Whatever they had found wasn't just ancient technology, it was responding to their presence. Min-Soo, Suji said quietly, I think we just found proof that we're not the first ones to send machines to Mars. The rover continued its work, gathering data about the mysterious energy source. As they watched the readings come in, they realized their understanding of Mars, and perhaps of humanity's place in the solar system, was about to change forever. That night, as Min-Soo prepared to hand over control to the next shift, he looked at the rover's camera feed one last time. The lights in the crater were still pulsing, like beacons in the Martian darkness. He couldn't help but wonder, what else would their faithful machines discover on the red planet? And more importantly, what had they just awakened? Dr. Choi Yun-hee had spent the past week studying Mars' geological maps. Her office walls were covered with images showing the planet's surface from different time periods. As she compared the newest rover data with ancient geological formations, she noticed something remarkable. The energy signatures aren't random, she said to herself, marking points on a large map. Each location where the rovers had detected energy matched perfectly with unusual geological formations that were millions of years old. Yun-hee quickly called Dr. Han Soo-jae and Dr. Kim Do-hwa to her office. When they arrived, she pointed to her discovery. Look at these patterns, she explained, drawing lines between the marked points. The energy signals form a network. And these lines match exactly with deep channels we thought were natural formations. Suji stepped closer to the map, her eyes wide. Those channels, they're the same ones showing water movement. Exactly, Yun-hee nodded. But here's the interesting part. These channels are too straight, too perfectly arranged. Nature doesn't work this way. Du has studied the patterns carefully. You're saying someone built these channels millions of years ago? Yes, Yun-hee said. And now, for some reason, the system is waking up. Our rovers triggered something. They spent the next few hours analyzing the data. The rovers had mapped a complex network of underground channels, all connected to the energy sources. Every few hours, the channels would pulse with energy in a regular pattern. Park Ji-ho joined them later that day. When they showed him their findings, he sat down heavily in a chair. So we're not just looking at water movement, he said slowly. We're looking at an ancient infrastructure system built across the entire planet. It seems that way, Yun-hee replied. She pulled up new images on her computer. And there's more. The energy pulses are getting stronger. They're following a pattern that matches Mars' day cycle. Suddenly, one of their phones buzzed. Lee Min-Soo was calling from the rover control room. "You need to see this," Min Su said when they put him on speaker. "The rovers are detecting new energy signatures. They're spreading across the network, like the system is running a test." They rushed to the control room. On the main screen, they could see the energy patterns moving through the channels. It looked like a giant circuit coming to life. "The remarkable thing is how the system responds to our rovers," Yun-hee explained to the others. "It's almost like the rovers are keys, activating different parts of the network." Suji watched the patterns move across the screen. Could this be why Mars lost its atmosphere? Was this system meant to maintain the planet somehow? As they discussed the possibilities, new data came in from the Chinese rover. It had discovered another energy source, perfectly aligned with Yun-hee's mapped network. "Whatever we found," Park said, looking at his team, "it's bigger than any one country's mission. This could be the key to understanding not just Mars' past, but its future too." That evening, as Yun-hee updated her maps with the latest data, she noticed something they had missed. The energy pulses weren't just following Mars' day cycle, they were gradually getting stronger with each pulse. The ancient system wasn't just awakening, it was building up to something. She looked at the rover's live feeds, showing the machines faithfully exploring the red planet's surface. These human-made explorers had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Now they needed to understand what would happen when the system fully awakened. Kang Ta-won stared at the weather monitors with growing concern. The dust storm approaching the rover's locations was larger than any they had seen in recent years. As technical lead, he knew what this meant for their mission. "The storm will reach the first rover in 6 hours," he announced to the team gathered in the control room. "We need to protect them, but we can't lose our connection to the energy network." Dr. Han Sujai looked up from her data screens. "If we power down the rovers completely, we might lose track of the energy patterns. They're growing stronger each day." The team watched as the massive dust storm moved across the Martian surface. Its swirling clouds were visible even from their satellite images, a giant brown mass crawling across the red planet. "What about partial shutdown?" Park Jae-ho suggested. "Keep only the essential systems running." Taiwan shook his head. "The dust will damage any exposed sensors. These storms can last for weeks." He pulled up technical diagrams of the rovers on his screen. "But I might have another idea." Working quickly, Taiwan began reprogramming the rover's protective protocols. His plan was risky. Use the rover's remaining power to create electromagnetic shields around their most sensitive equipment. "The ancient energy network responds to our rover's power signatures," he explained to the others. "If we can match our shields to those frequencies, we might be able to protect the rovers and maintain our connection to the network." As they worked, Dr. Choi Yun, he noticed something strange in the seismic data. "The energy pulses from the ancient system," she said, pointing to her screen. "They're synchronized with Mars' tremors." Suji moved to look at Yun-hee's data. "You mean the system is causing Marsquakes?" "No," Yun-hee replied. "I think it's responding to them, like it's trying to stabilize something deep under the surface." The dust storm drew closer. They could see it approaching on the rover's cameras, a wall of red dust blocking out the sun. Taiwan's fingers flew over his keyboard, making final adjustments to the rover's programs. "Shields activating now," he announced. The rover's power levels dropped as they diverted energy to their protective systems. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The first waves of dust hit. On their screens, they could see the storm engulfing the rovers one by one. The machine's external cameras went dark, covered in dust, but their internal systems continued sending data. "It's working," Taiwan said, checking the readings. "The shields are holding." But there was something else. The ancient energy network was responding to the shields. The pulses were growing stronger, matching the rover's defensive frequencies. "Look at this," Suji said suddenly. The energy network was creating its own protective field, extending outward from the channels they had discovered. It was as if the ancient system was helping them protect the rovers. As the storm raged on, They received unexpected data from the rover's seismic sensors. The energy pulses and Marsquakes were forming a clear pattern, one that Sujai recognized from Earth's geological history. "These aren't random tremors," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The system is trying to restart Mars' core activity. It's attempting to rebuild the planet's magnetic field." The team looked at each other in amazement. Their rovers had not only discovered an ancient planetary engineering system, they had accidentally helped reactivate it. Now they had to keep the machines safe through the storm to see what would happen next. The dust storm continued to batter the rovers, but protected by both human innovation and ancient technology, they stood their ground on the red planet's surface, recording every moment of this extraordinary awakening. 3 days after the dust storm began, the team made an extraordinary discovery. Dr. Kim Duha was the first to notice it while monitoring the rover's data streams in the early morning hours. "The energy signatures aren't just responding to our rovers," he said, calling the others to his screen. "They're learning from them." When Dr. Han Sujai arrived at the control center, Duha showed her the data patterns. The ancient Martian system was copying the rover's communication frequencies, adapting its energy pulses to match their signals perfectly. "It's like the system is trying to talk to our machines," Sujai said, studying the patterns carefully. "But why now? Why didn't it respond to our earlier rovers?" Lee Min-soo, who had been quietly analyzing the rover movements, spoke up. "Maybe it's because we have more rovers working together now. Look at this." He pointed to his screen, showing how the energy patterns formed stronger connections when multiple rovers worked in the same area. "Dr. Choi Yun," he rushed into the room with new geological data. "The system isn't just communicating," she said, spreading out her charts. "It's repairing itself. The water movements we detected, they're part of a cooling system for underground machinery." The team gathered around as Yun-Yi explained her theory. The ancient Martians had built a planet-wide maintenance system designed to keep their world habitable. When Mars began losing its atmosphere and magnetic field, the system went into hibernation, waiting for the right moment to restart. "Our rovers," Sujai said slowly, "they're like keys turning in old locks. Each new rover we send activates another part of the system." Park Ji-ho called an emergency meeting with all the international space agencies. As they shared their findings, the control room screens showed the dust storm finally beginning to clear. "We need to make a decision," Park told the gathered scientists and officials. "Do we continue to let our rovers interact with this system? Or do we pull back, wait for a manned mission to investigate?" The Chinese Space Agency representative spoke first. "Our rovers are already showing signs of enhanced capabilities. They're processing data faster, moving more efficiently. The ancient system is upgrading them." Indeed, the rovers had begun to display remarkable new behaviors. They could now predict Marsquakes before they happened, automatically moving to safer positions. They worked together without human input to maintain their connection to the energy network. "I believe," Duha said carefully, "that the ancient Martians left this system as a gift. They knew that someday another civilization would reach Mars. They left us the tools to restore their planet." As if to confirm his words, new data appeared on their screens. The energy network was expanding, reaching dormant sections of the ancient machinery. Deep under the Martian surface, long silent systems hummed back to life. Sujai watched the rover's camera feeds as the dust storm's final clouds drifted away. The machines stood firmly on the red soil, their sensors glowing with a mix of human and alien energy signatures. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Their simple explorers had become something more, bridges between Earth's technology and Mars's ancient wisdom. The question now wasn't whether to continue. The real question was, what would happen as more of the ancient system awakened? The rovers, these brave mechanical pioneers, were about to show humanity the true face of Mars. Park Ji-ho stood before the International Space Council in Seoul, feeling the weight of his next words. Representatives from every major space agency sat before him, waiting to hear his recommendation about the Mars mission. Our rovers have become more than just exploration tools, Park began, his voice steady. They are now part of something much bigger. The ancient Martian system is changing them, improving them, and through them, it's showing us how to restore the planet. The room was silent as he showed videos of the rover's new behaviors. The machines now moved with surprising grace across the Martian surface. They could repair each other, share power, and work together to activate more of the ancient system. Dr. Han Sujai stood up next to Park. Yesterday, 3 rovers working together activated a huge underground chamber, she said, showing new images on the screen. Inside, we found machinery that's still working after millions of years. The system is using our rover's power to restart these machines. Questions came quickly from the council members. Some were excited, others worried. The NASA director spoke up first. What happens if we lose control of the rovers? They're already operating beyond their original programming. Dr. Kim Doo-ha had an answer ready. The rovers aren't just following the ancient system's commands, he explained. They're creating something new, a blend of our technology and Martian engineering. They still respond to our instructions, but now they can also solve problems we never programmed them to handle. Lee Nin-soo showed them the latest rover data. Look at these patterns, he said, pointing to energy readings. The rovers are learning from the ancient system, but the system is also learning from our rovers. They're working together to find the best way to restore Mars. The Chinese Space Agency representative raised a concern. If this system can change our rovers so much, how do we know it's safe? What if it's not meant to help restore Mars? Dr. Choi Yun, he stepped forward with her geological data. Every change we've seen has had one clear purpose: to repair Mars' damaged systems. The water movement, the energy patterns, the deep machinery, they're all part of a planetary repair system. It's like a doctor's kit left behind by the ancient Martians. Park took control of the meeting again. We face a choice, he said firmly. We can pull back, wait years for a manned mission, and possibly lose this connection we've established. Or we can move forward, send more rovers, and work with this ancient system to understand Mars's secrets. He paused, looking at each person in the room. I recommend we continue the mission. More than that, I recommend we expand it. Send new rovers, specially designed to work with the ancient system. This is our chance to learn how to restore an entire planet. The room erupted in discussion. Hours passed as they debated the risks and possibilities. Finally, they reached a decision. The mission would continue, but with new safety protocols. They would send more rovers, but each one would have special programming to prevent it from losing its connection to Earth. That evening, as Park watched the rover feeds with his team, they saw something remarkable. The machines had gathered at one of the energy sites, forming a circle. Energy pulses moved between them, creating patterns that looked almost like a dance. They're celebrating, Min-soo said quietly, watching the rovers move. They know we're going to help them wake up their world. 6 months had passed since the International Space Council made their decision. The surface of Mars now hosted 30 rovers from different space agencies, all working together with the ancient system. Dr. Han Sujai watched their progress from the new Mars Control Center in Seoul, amazed by how much had changed. The magnetic field is getting stronger, she said to Dr. Kim Doo-ha, who stood beside her studying the latest readings. The ancient machines are rebuilding it piece by piece. The rovers had spread across the planet, each one connecting to different parts of the ancient system. They moved like a well-trained team, sharing tasks and helping each other. When one rover found something new, it would call others to help investigate. Kang Ta-won entered the control room with exciting news. The Chinese rover just activated another underground chamber, he said, bringing up the images on the main screen. This one contains what looks like a seed bank, thousands of preserved Mars plant samples. The team gathered around to look at the pictures. The chamber was huge, filled with rows of sealed containers. Each one held the key to life that once grew on Mars. The rovers were already scanning and cataloging everything they found. Dr. Choi has a theory about this, Lee Min-soo added, joining the group. She thinks the ancient Martians didn't just leave us instructions for fixing the planet. They left us everything we need to bring it back to life. Park Ji-ho called them all to a meeting later that day. The room was filled with excitement as he shared the latest development. NASA and ESA have approved the first manned mission, he announced. They want to send people to work directly with the rovers and the ancient system. Suji felt her heart race at the news. After all these months of watching through cameras and sensors, humans would finally walk on the surface of Mars. They would see with their own eyes what the rovers had discovered. The rovers have prepared the way, Park continued. They've mapped the safe zones, found water sources, and started activating atmospheric processors. They've made it possible for humans to survive there. The team spent the rest of the day watching their faithful machines at work. The rovers moved across the red planet's surface with purpose, each one playing its part in the great project of restoration. Some dug deep into the soil, planting sensors to monitor the planet's core. Others worked with the ancient machines, learning their secrets and helping them rebuild Mars piece by piece. Look at that, Duha said softly, pointing to one of the screens. A rover had stopped at the top of a hill to recharge its solar panels. The machine's sensors showed it was also taking time to scan the horizon, watching the sun set on the world it was helping to transform. They're not just machines anymore, Suji replied. They've become the guardians of Mars. When humans arrive, they'll find a planet that's already beginning to wake up, thanks to these rovers. As night fell on Mars, the rovers continued their work under the stars. Their lights moved across the surface like small, determined fireflies, each one carrying a piece of humanity's dreams and the ancient Martians' wisdom. The future of the Red Planet now lay in the partnership between human innovation and alien legacy, guided by the faithful rovers that had first unlocked its secrets. The story of Mars was entering a new chapter. Soon, human footprints would join the rovers' tracks in the red soil. But the robots would always be remembered as the first pioneers, the ones who showed humanity how to bring a dead world back to life.